The call came in just after 2:30 p.m. A Marine platoon was pinned down in a narrow valley near the Afghan border, cut off by machine guns and mortars raining down from both ridgelines. Their last radio transmission crackled with ammo counts and coordinates, voices tight with urgency. Command assessed the situation in minutes. No air support within range, no safe LZ. No rotor wing was authorized to go in. The stand-down order was issued. It was clear. Anyone flying into that valley wouldn't make it out. Then, as the rest of the flight line held its breath, one UH-60 Black Hawk spooled to life. The pilot didn't wait for clearance, didn't ask for backup. She knew who was out there, knew they were still alive. While others turned to protocol, she turned toward the gunfire. What happened next rewrote everything the rulebook said about flying into fire. Amanda Reyes was not the kind of pilot people bragged about in the chow hall. At 5'3" and barely tipping the scales, she looked more like someone who worked logistics than the woman trusted with a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Most folks at Forward Operating Base Wyndham called her the careful one, not in a good way. Too methodical, too by the book, too slow. She heard it all. It never bothered her. Every morning before a mission, she touched each rotor blade, checked every latch on the cargo doors, and ran her fingers along the tail boom like it could talk back. She didn't do it for luck. She did it because she knew what failure felt like. Amanda had logged over 400 flight hours since graduating from Fort Rucker. She flew through sandstorms, blackout ops, mechanical failures, and too many medevacs to count. She never once left a checklist incomplete. To most, she was just the careful girl, the pilot who never rushed, the one who triple-checked fuel levels and torque margins when others just glanced. But to her crew, Reyes was something else entirely. They saw the calm behind her rituals, the math always running in her head, the way she memorized every ridgeline, every wind pattern, every hot zone they flew over. And while other pilots joked about how slow she taxied to the pad, Amanda Reyes learned how to make a Black Hawk dance just inches from disaster. She didn't speak much in briefings, didn't argue, didn't posture. She listened, nodded, and walked out quiet. People underestimated her because she didn't fit the picture they expected, but they forgot something important. The most dangerous pilots aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones who stay silent, steady, and know exactly what they're flying into. At 1400 hours, a recon element from the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, moved into a narrow valley near the Afghan-Pakistan border. The terrain was steep, shadowed by high ridgelines, dry and silent, except for the wind. No one saw it coming. The first mortar hit less than 10 minutes after they entered. By the time the 2nd and 3rd landed, the valley had turned into a trap. Enemy fire poured from the hills. PKM machine guns swept the rocks below. RPGs arced from hidden nests. Forcing the Marines to ground, they were pinned, low and flat. With nowhere to maneuver and no cover wide enough to hold, some tried to fall back. But the exit trail was already cut off. Whoever planned the ambush knew what they were doing. It was coordinated, layered, and built to finish the job. Back at FOB Wyndham, the sitrep hit the operations center fast. Radios flared with broken calls, half sentences. Fire coordinates. Casualty counts. One squad leader came through just long enough to report 2 dead, 5 wounded, and ammo running low. The feed cut again. Staff officers stood around the map board, trying to piece together a picture with incomplete lines. Air support was at least 30 minutes out. A fast mover patrol had diverted south. No drones were close enough to provide overwatch. Rotary wing assets were available. But command flagged the valley red. Too hot. Too exposed. No authorized flight. Inside the ops tent, someone quietly started running numbers. They wouldn't say it aloud, but they were calculating body bags. If the enemy had full control of the high ground and the Marines were stuck without support, it wouldn't take long. No one said rescue? Not yet. No one dared suggest flying into a zone this hot. Outside, the air was dry and still. At the edge of the flight line, the rotors hadn't started turning. Yet, inside the operations center, the air was thick with heat and tension. Radios hissed with static. Voices broke in and out. Clipped and urgent. Officers leaned over maps, marking coordinates with grease pencils, tracing lines that led nowhere safe. The ridgeline fire was getting worse. Reports said enemy mortars were walking their fire downhill, adjusting fast. The pinned Marines had no room to move. Captain Greg Wallace stood near the comms table, headset pressed tight. His tone was flat but final. All rotary wing flights were grounded until fixed wing arrived. It would be at least 20 minutes. No Black Hawks were cleared to launch. The order echoed once more. Slow and deliberate. Stand down. That's final. Amanda Reyes stepped through the door. Just as the words landed, her eyes moved to the mission board. One glance was enough. The pinned unit was Lima Platoon. She had flown them out last week. Joked with them over chow. She knew their names. She didn't raise her voice. She just stepped forward and said what needed to be said. If we wait, they'll be dead before the jets get there. Silence followed. Wallace didn't look up right away. When he did, his answer came with a hard edge. You are not cleared. Do not launch. End of discussion. Reyes held his gaze for half a breath. Then she nodded once and turned to leave. No words. No argument. But something changed as she walked out. Her shoulders were steady, her steps measured. Behind her, the ops center buzzed with static and stress. Ahead of her, on the flight line, the air was still, just beyond the wire. Men she knew were bleeding in a valley no one dared enter. Not yet. Amanda stepped out of the ops center without looking back. Her boots hit the gravel with a steady rhythm, each step heavier than the last. The sun had climbed higher. The sky washed in that harsh Afghan blue. The air was thick with turban heat and the fine dust that never really settled. She walked straight toward tail number 22 to 482. Her assigned Black Hawk sitting at the edge of the flight line like it had been waiting. Sergeant Morales leaned against a stack of sandbags nearby. Arms crossed. Sunglasses pushed up. Specialist Dana Liu stood a few feet back, checking gear like she always did. Quiet and methodical. Both looked up as Reyes approached. They didn't ask. They didn't need to. Something in her face said more than words could. She stopped at the nose of the bird and laid her hand on the metal skin. Warm under the sun. She ran her fingers along the rivets. Paused at the intake. Eyes fixed on nothing. Then she spoke. Just loud enough to be heard. The mission scrubbed. Orders are hold. She let it hang there for a second before adding, soft and certain, but if we wait, they're done. Morales exhaled, once through his nose, pushed off the sandbags, and started walking toward the bird. Liu didn't say a word. She just grabbed her helmet and followed. No one raised their voice. No dramatic moment. Just a shift in the air as the crew moved, like they'd already known this was coming. Amanda strapped on her vest and climbed up to the cockpit. Every motion was smooth, practiced, deliberate. The silence wasn't hesitation. It was commitment. This wasn't about breaking rules. It was about not breaking faith with the men on the ground, with the job they'd sworn to do. She didn't look back toward command. That part was already behind her. The Black Hawk's blades cut through the thick afternoon heat as Amanda Reyes pulled power and lifted tail number 22 to 482 into the sky. It was just past 2:40 p.m. The base shrank behind them. Ahead, the valley waited. The radio lit up within seconds. Voices, barking return orders. Threats of disciplinary action. Warnings of active fire. Reyes didn't answer. She reached forward, turned down the volume, and leveled off. She flew low, not just low, terrain low, hugging ridges, sliding through dry gullies, dipping under tree lines. The airframe trembled with each push, but she held it firm. Flying like this wasn't instinct. It was math. Mortars couldn't adjust fast enough when you were below the ridgeline. Machine guns struggled to depress far enough when you came in under their noses. She'd trained for this. Not to disobey orders. To save lives when the air turned red. As they rounded the final slope, the valley opened, like a wound. Smoke curled from shell holes. Tracer fire laced the sky in violent threads. Rays flared, banked hard to the left, then brought the nose around fast. Her voice stayed calm in the headset. We're not flying into fire. We're flying to them. The Marines came into view, some firing, some corralling, some dragging others. Every second counted now. Reyes found a strip of rock just wide enough to risk it. The tail rotor hung over open drop. There was no margin. She brought the Black Hawk down. Hard, but solid. Rounds cracked against the doors. The skin of the aircraft rang out with hits. Morales was already halfway out the hatch, pulling in the first of the wounded. Lou's door gun chattered once, warning fire to the ridge. The bird rocked with each movement, overloaded with weight and dust and heat. The engine whined under the strain. Inside the cockpit, Reyes held her breath. Her hands never left the controls. Outside, shouts hoard, but inside, it was focus. This was what she'd been built for. Not speeches, not medals, just this moment, staying in the fire long enough to bring somebody out of it. Amanda circled wide, keeping the bird low as they looped back for the second run. It was 3:15 p.m. now, and the fight below had grown teeth. Enemy fire was no longer scattered. It was sharp, fast, coordinated. Every ridgeline spit flame. They knew the Black Hawk was coming back. This time, they were ready. Reyes took a new approach vector, skimming the far side of the ridge, banking hard around a rock outcrop to avoid being silhouetted. It bought them maybe 30 seconds. Then the sky lit up. Tracers came in waves, rising toward them like sparks from a blowtorch. Below, mortar rounds bracketed the valley floor. The whole zone was alive with sound and fire. Halfway in, the missile alert screamed. Reyes didn't flinch. Her hand hit the flare switch, and the UH-60 kicked out bright decoys just as a shoulder-fired missile streaked from the trees. The explosion lit the air behind them. Shrapnel rattled the fuselage. Warning lights blinked red across the console. Damage on the port side. Vibration in the tail. The aircraft was still flying, but every second felt like borrowed time. She didn't pull off. She leveled out, hit in her voice, and dropped into the zone again. The LZ was worse than before. Narrower, less cover. As the skids kissed rock, Morales opened fire with the M240. The roar of the gun filled the cabin. Liu was already halfway out, dragging two wounded Marines by their vests, sweat streaking her face. More gunfire echoed against the cliffs. Someone screamed through the radio. Smoke poured from a burning vehicle below. It smelled like cordite, metal, and blood. Inside the cockpit, Reyes fought the controls. The stick trembled in her hands. Hydraulic pressure was holding. Barely. Every warning light screamed for her to lift off. Now. 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 But she waited. Not until Lou pulled the last man up. Not until Morales gave the signal. The moment the doors slammed shut, Reyes pulled pitch, and the Black Hawk clawed upward. Heavy and damaged, but still flying. No celebration. Just the deafening engine and the weight of lives on board. Hell had opened beneath them, and they were still flying through it. The third run began just past 3:40 p.m. The ridge lines were crawling now. Every movement bait for a missile or burst of machine gun fire. Amanda Reyes flew lower than ever. Her knuckles tight on the controls. Her face locked in the calm that only comes when everything inside is already burning. She chose a new route, threading a narrow canyon so tight They nearly skimmed rock with the rotors. It was their only shot to slip through unseen. It didn't work. The missile alert screamed into the headset. Her co-pilot's voice cut through it. Lock. Incoming. Left side. Rages, didn't hesitate. Flares out. Dive left. Hard. The Black Hawk dropped like a stone, tail sliding just above the terrain. The missile missed by feet, exploding in a bright flash behind them that shook the bird midair. Shrapnel sprayed the tail boom. Lights on the panel lit up again. Structural warning. Fuel pressure. Heat buildup. The Black Hawk was hurting. But Reyes kept going. As they cleared the ridge and dropped back into the kill zone, small arms fire slammed into the fuselage like hail. Morales opened up with the M240, sweeping the ridgeline to give them room. The LZ was barely a path this time. Reyes brought them in anyway. Boots hit the ground before the skids settled. Marines ran, limped, dragged each other forward. Inside the cabin, Lou reached out both arms, hauling wounded aboard. There was no more room. Still, they came. Shouts, blood, hot metal under their hands. A wounded corporal collapsed against Reyes' seat as the cabin filled past capacity. The weight pressed hard. The engine screamed. Warning tones stacked on top of each other. Morales yelled something from the back. Lou slammed the door shut. Reyes pulled pitch. The Black Hawk groaned. It didn't rise at first. Then slowly, agonizingly. The nose lifted. The rotors clawed at the air. Dust swirled. Rounds snapped past the tail. One more second, and they wouldn't have made it. But they did. Just barely. As they broke above the ridgeline, the valley disappeared behind them. Inside the cockpit, Reyes didn't speak. She just exhaled. Once, long and quiet. It wasn't over, but they were still in the sky. The cockpit smelled like burning metal. The warning lights had been on since the last run, blinking in a pattern Amanda Reyes had stopped reading. She already knew. Fuel low. Hydraulics near failure. Engine temperature rising past the safe threshold. The Black Hawk was holding together with grit and stubbornness, but there were still Marines on the ground. This was the last lift. No one else was coming. As they crossed into the valley one final time, everything hit harder. Mortars bracketed their flight path, so close the pressure slapped the windows. RPGs sliced through the air ahead of them. Small arms fire was constant, like rain on a tin roof. The LZ was smoke and flame, nothing clear, no safe approach. But Reyes didn't hesitate. She came in low and fast. Skids catching hard on uneven rock. The tail rotor swung wide, dangerously exposed to the slope behind them. Morales was already halfway out the cabin before they were fully down. Lou reached for the first Marine, dragging him through blood and dust and into the bird. Another came, then another. Some collapsed into the fuselage. Some were pushed in by the Marines behind them, shoulder to shoulder. Overweight, over limit. There was no room left. But no one said stop. Reyes felt the Black Hawk strain beneath them. The frame groaned. The engine whined like it was begging for mercy. She kept one hand on the collective, the other steady on the cyclic. She waited for the nod. Morales slammed the door. She pulled pitch. The skids scraped against the rock. Once, then again. The rotors struggled, the whole airframe vibrating like it would shake apart. For a moment, it didn't feel like they'd lift. Then they did, slowly, reluctantly, climbing. An RPG exploded just short of the tail, rocking them in midair. Tracers chased them past the ridge. Reyes kept her hands steady. Eyes forward, breath tight. The kill zone dropped away behind them. Inside the bird, it was quiet, not silence. Breathing, groaning, the soft rattle of gear and metal. They were airborne. Everyone was aboard. Amanda didn't say anything. She didn't need to. They'd done the impossible, and every inch of sky between them and the base was hard-earned. It was 4:20 p.m. when Amanda Reyes brought the Black Hawk down onto the tarmac at FOB Wyndham. The landing gear creaked under the weight. The engines coughed, hot and strained. The airframe was battered. The paint scorched. The body marked with blackened holes. One rotor blade wobbled slightly, just enough to notice. When the rotors slowed and the ramp dropped, the crew didn't speak. The Marines came out fast. Some stumbled, some limped, some were carried, all of them alive. Medics rushed in, weaving between fuel trucks and scattered tools. Ground crews stood still at first, stunned by the damage. Then one turned, then another. Slowly, hands rose in salute. No ceremony, no orders, just quiet respect. Captain Wallace crossed the tarmac. His face was unreadable. He stopped in front of her, told her she'd disobeyed a direct order. Reyes looked him in the eye and said, "Yes, sire, but I brought them home. No anger, no triumph, just the truth." Later, there were forms, hearings, a formal reprimand. Her name went on 2 different lists. Reckless, said one report. Commendable, said another. She received a citation, then a warning. Some called her impulsive. Others called her something else. Hero was a word whispered more than spoken. Weeks passed, then months. At Fort Novo Cell, flight instructors pulled out her story during case study lectures. They debated decision-making, risk profiles, the structure of command, but one line stayed on the board, not the one from the report. The one she said herself, "But I brought them home." Amanda Reyes never gave interviews, never stood on stages. She went back to her duties. Still methodical, still careful, still the one who never cut corners. What she did that day stayed with her, not as pride, as weight, as a memory she didn't replay often, but never forgot, because real courage doesn't always come with a cheer or a flag. Sometimes, it's a quiet decision made in the silence, when everyone else steps back, and you step forward.